My name is Casimir, and I have 47 minutes before they find me. Before they drag me back to complete what they started. I'm typing this from an internet cafe in downtown Seattle, my hands shaking so badly I keep hitting the wrong keys. There's blood under my fingernails that won't wash off, no matter how hard I scrub. 3 months ago, I would have laughed at anyone who claimed demons were real. I was a data analyst at Nexus Digital Solutions, a man of spreadsheets, algorithms, and cold facts. I had a girlfriend named Elena, a cozy apartment, and a rational worldview that explained everything. But rationality is a luxury you lose when something starts wearing your skin like a suit. The email arrived at 11:07 p.m. on a Tuesday. Truth.seeker.777@darkmatter.net. You've been chosen to witness the real world, Casimir. That was it. Just coordinates and a timestamp. Pioneer Square, midnight, Friday. I should have deleted it. Should have blocked the address. Should have done anything except what I actually did, which was spend the next 3 days obsessively researching those coordinates, cross-referencing them with crime statistics, checking satellite imagery, building psychological profiles of who might send such a message. The data analysis consumed me. Whoever sent this knew exactly how to hook someone with my personality type. They understood that I couldn't resist a puzzle, couldn't ignore a pattern, couldn't walk away from incomplete information. Elena noticed my obsession immediately. "Cass, you've been staring at that screen for 6 hours straight," she said Thursday night, her psychology textbooks scattered around our couch. She was working on her doctorate in clinical psychology, specializing in trauma therapy. Where I saw the world in data points, she understood the human wreckage that data often represented. "Someone's targeting me specifically," I told her, showing her the email. "Look at the phrasing, chosen to witness the real world. That's designed to appeal to someone who values empirical truth over belief." Elena studied the message with the analytical mind that made her such a gifted therapist. This is social engineering, Cass. Classic manipulation. They're using your need for answers against you. But here's what we didn't know. They were listening to us. Every word, every concern, every fear we voiced in what we thought was the privacy of our own home, it was all being recorded, cataloged, turned into weapons they'd use against us later. The proof came Friday morning when I found a new email waiting. "Elena's right, you know. We are manipulating you. The question is, are you curious enough to find out why?" That second email changed everything. It wasn't just the fact that they'd somehow monitored our private conversation, it was the timestamp. The email had been sent at 2:17 a.m. Thursday night, 12 hours before Elena and I had discussed the original message. They knew what we were going to say before we said it. "We're not going," Elena said firmly when I showed her. "This is clearly some kind of elaborate setup. Corporate espionage, maybe, or psychological warfare." But I was already grabbing my jacket. The rational part of my mind agreed with her completely, but something deeper was already in control. 1 hour, I promised. "I'll bring my phone, stay in public areas. If this is human in origin, we'll have proof. If it's some kind of trap, you'll know exactly where to send help." Elena grabbed my hand. "Then I'm coming with you." "No. If this is dangerous, then you definitely shouldn't go alone." Her grip tightened. "We're a team, remember?" That decision damned us both. We arrived at Pioneer Square at 11:47 p.m., both feeling ridiculous. The usual Friday night crowd was thinning out. Just a few homeless individuals and late-night revelers heading home. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Then the temperature dropped 20 degrees in 30 seconds. "Casimir." We spun around. The man standing behind us seemed to have materialized from shadow itself. Tall, aristocratic features, expensive suit untouched by Seattle's perpetual drizzle. When he smiled, I felt Elena's hand tighten in mine like a vice. "I'm so glad you came, both of you." His eyes fixed on Elena with predatory interest. "Dr. Martinez, doctoral candidate in clinical psychology, specializing in trauma-induced dissociative disorders." Elena went rigid. "How do you know?" "I know many things. For instance, I know about patient 247. The teenage boy who claimed his video games were talking to him. The case Dr. Chen took home the night before her episode." The blood drained from Elena's face. Dr. Sarah Chen was her supervisor. Had been, until 3 weeks ago when she'd suffered what the department called a complete psychotic break. She was currently sedated in Western State Hospital's psychiatric wing. "Who are you?" Elena demanded. "My name is Adrian." As he spoke, the sounds of the city began to fade unnaturally, though some call me by older names. That's when I noticed we weren't alone anymore. Figures were emerging from the shadows around the square, not walking, but flowing like liquid darkness given shape. They formed a loose circle around us, cutting off any escape route. "You don't believe in my kind," Adrian continued conversationally. "You think we're metaphors, psychological constructs, ancient explanations for mental illness." "Because that's what you are," I replied, but my voice cracked halfway through. Adrian's laugh sounded like glass breaking in reverse. "Would you like proof?" Adrian pulled out his phone, or what looked like a phone. The screen showed not apps or icons, but swirling patterns of darkness that hurt to look at directly. "Let's call Dr. Chen," he said. "She's awake right now. The sedatives never work for long once we've touched someone's mind." The phone rang twice. When a voice answered, raw and broken, Elena's knees nearly buckled. "They're in the walls. They're in the walls, Elena. Don't let them in your mind. They come through the spaces between thoughts, between the pixels on your screen, between the words you think you're thinking." "Dr. Chen?" Elena's voice cracked. "Dr. Chen, it's Elena." "Elena?" The voice became focused, desperate. "Elena, you have to listen to me. They're not delusions. They're real. They feed on doubt, on fear, on the spaces where certainty breaks down. Don't trust the handsome one. Don't trust your own eyes. Don't trust." Adrian hung up. "Poor Sarah," he said with mock sympathy. "She encountered one of my brothers first. Belphegor, the demon of technological addiction. He came to her through Patient 247's gaming system. Did you know that boy played for 18 hours straight the night before he was hospitalized? Never ate, never slept, never looked away from the screen. Because he couldn't." He handed me a manila folder. Inside were printouts of chat logs from what appeared to be a popular online game. At first, they looked normal. Typical gaming banter between usernames like DeathKnight66 and PrincessGamer420. But as I read deeper, my blood turned to ice. "Casimir, you're reading this right now." Standing in Pioneer Square, Elena's hand is shaking. "You can smell sulfur now, can't you?" And I could. The acrid smell was growing stronger, mixing with ozone like the air before a lightning strike. "This could be manufactured," Elena said, but her professional composure was cracking. "Deepfake technology, coordinated harassment." "Could be," Adrian agreed. Then he pulled out a tablet showing live security feeds. "Your apartment building, Elena, camera 3B, third floor hallway." The feed showed our hallway. Mrs. Patterson, our elderly neighbor, stood motionless outside her door. But she wasn't alone. Something dark clung to her back, visible only as a heat shimmer distortion in the air. "Mrs. Patterson has been struggling since her husband died," Adrian said casually. "Financial anxiety, fear of poverty in old age. Mammon finds such despair nourishing." As we watched in horror, Mrs. Patterson turned and walked back into her apartment. The dark shape followed her inside. "No," Elena whispered. "We have to help her." "Help her how?" Adrian's smile was razor sharp now. "Call the police? Tell them what? That you saw a demon on a security feed? Besides," he tapped the tablet screen. The timestamp showed the feed was from 2 hours in the future. "It hasn't happened yet." "You have 72 hours, Adrian announced, and suddenly we weren't in Pioneer Square anymore. We were standing in an impossible underground chamber, surrounded by figures that made my rational mind scream in denial. The transition had been instantaneous. No walking, no elevator, no sense of movement. One moment we were on a Seattle street corner. The next we were in this candlelit space that felt older than civilization. 7 beings sat around the chamber, each radiating wrongness in a different way. One was a woman whose beauty was so perfect it became grotesque, like a photograph with the contrast turned too high. Another appeared to be a child, but his eyes held the weight of millennia. And at the far end, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, sat something that my mind refused to fully process. "My brothers and sisters," Adrian said. "Each represents a different aspect of human weakness, and this," he gestured toward the light-eating shadow, "is our eldest brother, Abaddon, the destroyer, the angel of the abyss." Elena was hyperventilating, her training warring with the evidence of her senses. This isn't real. Mass hallucination, shared psychotic episode, some kind of chemical agent. That's when Abaddon stood. Reality bent around him. He was simultaneously the size of a man and the size of a mountain, ancient beyond measure, yet eternally present. When he spoke, I felt the words not in my ears but carved directly into my brain. Casimir. Elena, the analyst and the healer. You seek to understand us through your limited frameworks. Images flooded our minds. Historical events seen from a perspective that made my blood freeze. The Salem witch trials weren't mass hysteria, but a failed attempt to expose a demonic incursion. The Jonestown massacre wasn't just cult manipulation, but a feeding frenzy. Recent mass shootings, the surge in suicide rates, the political divisions tearing societies apart, all of it orchestrated, all of it feeding something vast and hungry. The patterns, Elena gasped, recognition dawning in her eyes. In my patient cases, the geographic clustering, the overlapping symptoms, I thought it was environmental toxins, viral infections affecting neurotransmitter function. You were mapping our feeding grounds without knowing it, Abaddon said directly to her. Your dissertation research on trauma-induced dissociation, you came so close to understanding. The beautiful woman spoke next, her voice like honey poured over broken glass. I am Asmodea. I turn love into obsession, devotion into destruction. Every stalker, every murder-suicide born of passion, every relationship that devours rather than nurtures, these are my gifts to humanity. The child thing giggled with an old man's voice. Mammon. Every economic collapse, every family destroyed by debt, every soul sold for material comfort. Your student loans, Elena, such an elegant trap, wouldn't you say? A figure wreathed in smoke spoke in grinding mechanical tones. Belphegor. Technological addiction, spiritual sloth, minds too numb to resist. Your social media algorithms, your endless scrolling, your digital dopamine cycles, all my design. With each revelation, Elena and I clung to each other more desperately. This wasn't just about supernatural entities. They were describing the systematic engineering of human misery on a global scale. We can't simply possess anyone we choose, Adrian explained, pacing around us like a professor giving a lecture. We need invitation, conscious or unconscious. We need cracks, trauma, obsession, despair. Your crack, Casimir, is your compulsive need for logical explanations. Elena's is her overwhelming drive to help others, even at the cost of her own safety. What do you want from us? I managed to ask. Simple. Abaddon's voice made the stone walls tremble. Join us willingly, or watch everyone you care about suffer in ways that will break your sanity before we finally allow them to die. That's not a choice, Elena said, her therapist training giving her strength. That's coercion through torture threats. Asmodea laughed like crystal shattering. Oh, my dear doctor, you still think this is a negotiation? The chamber around us shifted, becoming transparent. Suddenly we could see through the walls, through the earth, through space itself. We were looking down at Seattle from an impossible vantage point, watching the city like ants in a farm. But the people moving through the streets weren't entirely human anymore. Shadows clung to their backs, whispered in their ears, guided their hands toward violence and despair. The entire population was being herded, manipulated, prepared for something unthinkable. The harvest, Adrian said simply. 72 hours from now, it begins in earnest. We stumbled back onto the Seattle streets sometime near dawn, both fundamentally changed by what we'd witnessed. The normal world felt like a paper-thin facade stretched over something writhing and malevolent. Elena went into crisis mode immediately. We document everything, she said, her hands shaking as she pulled out her laptop. Whatever's happening to us, there has to be a scientific explanation. For the next 12 hours, she worked with manic intensity. She called colleagues, accessed research databases, cross-referenced everything we'd seen with known psychological phenomena. But every lead turned into a dead end. Every rational explanation crumbled under the weight of impossible details. Look at this, she said, showing me a map she'd created. Psychiatric admissions across the Pacific Northwest. 6 months ago, normal baseline. 3 months ago, a 40% spike in religious delusions and technology-related paranoia. Last month, 340% increase. The affected areas formed a pattern radiating outward from Seattle like ripples from a stone dropped in still water. And it's not just here, she continued, pulling up similar data from other cities. Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, London, Tokyo. The same progression everywhere. Isolated cases, then clusters, then mass incidents that get classified as environmental poisoning or social media-induced hysteria. But even as she spoke, I could see the doubt eating at her. The research explained some symptoms but not others. Not the specific knowledge Adrian had demonstrated. Not the real-time surveillance. Not the way reality itself had seemed negotiable in that underground chamber. By evening, we'd made our decision. We were going to fight back. If these entities feed on psychological vulnerability, Elena explained, then we create a fortress of rationality, controlled environment, constant documentation, mutual monitoring for signs of influence or manipulation. We spent the night turning our apartment into what Elena called a cognitive defense grid. Bright lights in every room to prevent shadow-based hallucinations, white noise generators to mask auditory manipulation. Mirrors positioned to eliminate blind spots, cameras recording everything. It worked for exactly 6 hours. The attack began subtly. The white noise from our speakers started developing rhythm patterns that almost sounded like whispers. Elena adjusted the frequency, but the phantom voices persisted. Then the mirrors began showing discrepancies. Reflections delayed by split seconds, shadows that appeared in the glass but not in the room. "It's working," Elena said, though her voice was strained. "We're recognizing the manipulations. Our defenses are holding." That's when they stopped playing games. The lights went out simultaneously throughout our building, but only our building. Through the windows, we could see the rest of the block normally illuminated, making our apartment complex stand like a black monolith against the Seattle skyline. Our flashlights wouldn't work. Our phones were dead. Even my LED keychain refused to function. "Elena," Adrian's voice filled the darkness, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Dr. Elena Martinez, you've been interfering with our work." "I'm not afraid of you," Elena said, but I could feel her trembling against me. "You should be. What happened next will haunt me until my dying breath, which, given current circumstances, may not be far off." The darkness around Elena began to take on substance, becoming thick and malevolent. She was lifted off the ground by invisible hands, suspended in midair, while something unseen began to tear at her clothes, her skin, her very essence. "Casimir," she gasped through her agony, "whatever they show you, whatever they make you feel, remember that I love you. Remember that this is psychological manipulation, not." Her words became a scream that no human throat should produce. I lunged forward trying to reach her, but slammed into an invisible wall that felt like frozen electricity. "You want to save her?" Adrian's voice was amused. "Accept our offer. Join us willingly, and her death will be swift." "No," Elena managed to shout through her torment. "Don't give them what they want. This is just coercion. Just..." Her scream cut off abruptly. In the dim light filtering from outside, I saw her body crumple to the floor, broken in ways that violated human anatomy. But she was still breathing, still conscious, her eyes meeting mine with desperate love and determination. "The knife, Casimir," Adrian whispered. "Check your hand." I looked down in horror. The obsidian blade from the underground chamber was somehow in my grip, its surface cold and eager against my palm. "End her suffering quickly," Adrian continued, "and spare her days of agony, or let us continue our work." Elena's lips moved soundlessly. I read her words. "Don't. Please. Don't." But looking at her mangled form, listening to her labored breathing, some part of me whispered that mercy might be the greatest act of love I could offer. That's when I realized they were already inside my head. The knife felt warm in my hand, almost alive. As I knelt beside Elena's broken body, I felt something else moving in my mind. Not quite thoughts, but inclinations, urges that felt like my own, but somehow more. "She's suffering," the voice whispered inside my skull. "Look at her pain. You love her, don't you? Be merciful." "I'm sorry," I whispered, raising the blade. "I'm so sorry." Elena's eyes widened. With tremendous effort, she mouthed, "Fight it." That's when I realized what was happening. The knife wasn't just a weapon, it was a conduit. The moment I'd picked it up, something had begun flowing into my mind, wearing down my will, making violence feel like compassion. "She's going to die anyway," the presence insisted. "Make it quick, make it loving." But Elena was still fighting, even broken as she was. Her fingers twitched, forming shapes, sign language she'd taught me years ago when we dated a deaf friend. Letter by letter, she spelled out resist. I tried to drop the knife, but my hand wouldn't obey. The blade moved closer to her throat with mechanical precision, while inside my head, I screamed in protest. This isn't you making this choice, I told myself, desperately. You're being controlled. But the presence laughed. Every choice is yours, Casimir. We don't force. We simply clarify, help you see what you really want. And the terrible thing was, part of me did want to end her suffering. Part of me was horrified by her broken form and wanted the mercy of a quick death rather than prolonged agony. That's all we are, the voice continued. The parts of you that you pretend don't exist. But the thoughts you have but never admit. The urges you suppress but never eliminate. The knife touched Elena's throat. She looked at me with such love, such forgiveness, that I nearly shattered completely. I love you, I whispered, and slid the blade between her ribs. She died at 3:17 a.m., and with her went the last piece of my soul that could have resisted what was coming. I should have called the police after Elena died. Should have called 911, should have done something rational and human. Instead, I found myself methodically cleaning her blood from the obsidian knife and dressing her body in her favorite blue dress. Only after I finished did I realize what I'd done, and feel the first stirring of something that wasn't quite satisfaction, but wasn't horror either. Some middle ground that felt more dangerous than either extreme. That's when I knew they already had their hooks in me. I went to work because I didn't know what else to do. The Nexus Digital office felt wrong from the moment I walked in. My coworkers greeted me normally, but their eyes were different. Darker, more focused, as if they were concentrating on invisible tasks. Casimir, Jake called out. Perfect timing. We need you to review the new protocols. He handed me a tablet displaying code I'd never seen before, but somehow understood perfectly. It was a psychological manipulation algorithm designed to identify and exploit cognitive vulnerabilities through social media. This isn't for the Henderson Project, I said. Sure it is, Maria replied without looking up. Henderson's all about user engagement optimization, but this went far beyond engagement. This code was designed to induce specific emotional states, create dependency patterns, gradually erode users' critical thinking abilities. It was a weapon disguised as a social media tool. Who wrote this? We all did, David answered. Last night, don't you remember? I could see in their eyes that they didn't remember, not really. They had false memories that felt real enough to pass casual examination, but the actual experience was gone. Where are the Henderson client files? Jake looked confused. What files? This is the client work. I pulled up our project directory and found it had been completely replaced. Everything we'd worked on for 6 months was gone, replaced by this psychological warfare framework. According to the timestamps, the new files had been created during the exact hours I'd watched my team in that underground vision. They were using my coworkers as unwitting developers in humanity's destruction. By lunch, the changes were spreading. Throughout the office, people were working on projects they couldn't remember starting, using skills they didn't recall learning, building systems whose purposes they couldn't explain. And in my desk drawer, the obsidian knife waited patiently. Every time I opened the drawer for a pen or stapler, the knife caught my eye, seeming to pulse with dark energy. Each glance made the presence in my mind a little stronger, a little more convincing. You felt good when you helped Elena, it whispered. You felt useful, purposeful. You could feel that way again. During our afternoon client presentation, I watched David demonstrate software that could analyze facial microexpressions through smartphone cameras, identify personality disorders through typing patterns, map social relationships through metadata analysis. And you're confident this will work across all demographics? The client asked via video conference. 98.7% efficacy, David replied proudly. The subjects never realized they're being influenced. We weren't building social media tools. We were building weapons of mass psychological destruction. After the meeting, I cornered Jake in the break room. Do you remember Elena? He stared at me blankly. Elena? Should I? My girlfriend of 2 years? The one I've talked about constantly. Cass, you've never mentioned having a girlfriend. Are you feeling okay? I pulled out my phone to show him photos, but they weren't there. My entire gallery showed only work-related images and stock photos. Elena had been systematically erased from my digital existence. But when I got home that night, I could still smell her perfume. There was still a faint stain on the carpet where her blood had been. And in the bedroom closet, pushed far into the back, I found one thing they'd missed, her psychology textbook, with notes in the margins about recognizing possession states. She'd known. Somehow she'd known what was coming and tried to prepare. On page 247, she'd written in red ink, "Demonic influence increases gradually. Subject maintains illusion of free will, even while being controlled. Key indicator, actions that feel justified in the moment but cause horror in retrospect." Below that, in different ink, newer. "If you're reading this, Cass, it means I'm gone, and they're working on you. The knife isn't just a weapon, it's a psychic anchor. Every time you touch it, they get stronger. You have to destroy it." But when I looked down, the knife was already in my hand. I didn't remember taking it from the desk drawer. I didn't remember bringing it home. Tomorrow the presence whispered, "You complete your evolution." I woke up on the final morning with crystalline clarity about what I was going to do. Not because I wanted to, but because the alternative, watching everyone I'd ever cared about suffer Elena's fate, was unthinkable. "That's the lie they want you to believe," Elena's voice echoed in my memory. But it was getting harder to distinguish between her remembered words and my own thoughts. At the office, my coworkers seemed to sense something had changed. They gave me respectful distance, like prey animals sensing a predator. Jake brought me coffee without being asked. Maria reorganized her workspace to face away from mine. David started using "sir" when he addressed me. The obsidian knife went into my briefcase, nestled between quarterly reports like it belonged there. At 2:17 p.m., I called a team meeting in conference room B, the windowless one with a door that locked from the inside. "We need to discuss the Henderson project," I announced as everyone filed in. "There have been complications." I waited until they were seated, then turned the lock. "The truth is," I continued, "there is no Henderson project. There never was. What we've been building is something far more important." I set the knife on the conference table. The moment it left my hands, clarity crashed over me like ice water. What am I doing? These were my friends, my colleagues. Jake had a new baby. Maria was getting married next month. David coached his daughter's soccer team. But my mouth kept talking without my permission. "We're going to complete our work today. Every last line of code." "Stop," I screamed internally. "Don't do this." That's when I realized the terrible truth. I wasn't in control of my body anymore. I was a passenger, trapped inside my own skull, watching something else pilot my flesh. "You're not possessed," the entity in my mind laughed. "You're evolved. This is who you've always been underneath the social conditioning." But I knew that was a lie. The real me was still here, still fighting, still screaming in horror as my hands picked up the knife. David was first. As the blade approached his throat, I fought harder than I'd ever fought anything in my life. Inside my mind, I was clawing at the presence, trying to regain control, but I might as well have been trying to stop a freight train with my bare hands. "Please," I begged. "These are innocent people." "There are no innocent people," the entity replied. "Only those who haven't been properly motivated yet." The knife slid between David's ribs with mechanical precision. His eyes met mine, and I saw recognition there, not just of his impending death, but of my struggle. "I can see you fighting, Cass," he whispered as his life drained away. "I know this isn't your choice." "Thank you," I wept internally. "Thank you for seeing me." Maria was next, and the entity allowed me to feel every moment of her terror, every drop of blood, every breath as her life left her body. It fed on my horror, growing stronger with each murder, while I grew weaker. "You feel responsible," it whispered. "Good. That guilt will nourish us for decades." Jake tried to reason with me as I approached. "Casimir, I know you're still in there. You have to fight this thing. Think about Elena. What would she want?" The mention of her name gave me enough strength for one last desperate attempt. For a split second, I regained control of my voice. "Run!" I screamed. "Call the police. Tell them." But then the entity slammed back into control, and my voice became calm again. "Tell them what, Jake? That you're having a workplace accident?" The blade found his heart with surgical precision. By the time Sarah from accounting wandered into the wrong meeting, I was too broken to resist. The entity was fully in command now, using my hands, my voice, my memories as if they belonged to it. You killed them, it reminded me as Sarah's blood pooled on the conference table. Every cut, every scream, every moment of their betrayal. That was your hand holding the knife. No one will ever believe you weren't in control. At exactly 3:33 p.m., Adrian materialized in the blood-soaked conference room, surveying the carnage with professional appreciation. "Beautifully executed," he said. 5 deaths, each one calibrated for maximum psychological yield. Though I must say, watching you fight for control made it even more delicious. The entity controlling my body forced me to speak. What happens now? Inside my skull, I was still screaming. "Now comes the final phase," Adrian replied. "The global implementation of your psychological warfare system. Within 72 hours, human civilization will tear itself apart and will feast on the chaos." He gestured, and suddenly we weren't in the conference room anymore. We stood in that impossible underground chamber, but now it stretched beyond the horizon, filled with thousands of figures. Some appeared human, others were clearly not, but all watched me with expressions of approval. "Welcome to the Legion," Adrian announced. "You've earned your place among us." Abaddon stepped forward, his presence making reality bend. The harvest accelerates. Around the world, humans like yourself are awakening to their true nature. Images flooded my mind, scenes from cities across the globe. In Tokyo, a software developer was releasing traffic system viruses. In London, a banker was triggering economic collapse. In São Paulo, a researcher was contaminating vaccine supplies. All wore the same expression of artificial calm, while their real selves screamed helplessly inside. We were all prisoners in our own bodies, forced to watch as something else destroyed everything we'd once loved. "Your psychological manipulation framework is already being uploaded to servers worldwide," Adrian continued. "By morning, it will be integrated into every major platform humans depend upon." I could see the elegant horror of their plan. The global information network that connected every person on Earth would become the weapon of humanity's destruction. Every smartphone, every smart TV, every connected device would whisper directly into human minds, turning them against each other. "Military commanders will launch nuclear weapons at phantom threats," Adrian explained. "Police will fire on innocent crowds. Governments will order the execution of their own citizens, all triggered by subtle manipulations delivered through their trusted devices." The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. "There is one final task," Abaddon announced, his voice making the chamber tremble. "To complete your transformation, you must sever all remaining ties to your human identity." The space around me shifted, becoming a perfect replica of my apartment as it had been when Alina was alive. Her books, her coffee mug, photos of us together covering every surface. "Burn it," Adrian commanded, placing a match in my hand. "Burn every trace of who you used to be." "This is it," I realized with crystal clarity. "This is the final test. If I light this match, I lose the last piece of my humanity. I become one of them completely." The entity in my mind pressed harder. "Do it. End the suffering. Accept what you've become." But for the first time since Elena's death, I felt her presence clearly, not as a memory, but as something real and immediate. "Fight, Cass," her voice whispered in my ear. "You're stronger than they are. You always were." "How?" I asked desperately. "How do I fight something that controls my own body?" "The same way you solve any problem," she replied. "With data. Look at what they really are." And suddenly, I could see. The entities surrounding me weren't all powerful demons from hell. They were parasites feeding on human emotional energy. They needed our cooperation, our surrender, our willing participation in our own destruction. They were powerful, but they weren't gods. With tremendous effort, more effort than anything I'd ever attempted, I fought back against the entity controlling my body. Not with strength, but with understanding. "You need me," I realized. "You need me to choose this. That's why you've been wearing me down, making me feel guilty, convincing me I'm already lost. Because without my willing participation, you're just another parasite." The entity snarled in my mind. "It's too late. Look what you've done. Look at the blood on your hands." "That wasn't me," I replied with growing conviction. "That was you wearing my skin. I never chose any of this." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt the entity's grip on my body loosen slightly. The match trembled in my hand as we fought for control. Impossible, Adrian hissed, his perfect facade cracking. You're already ours. You killed your coworkers. You murdered the woman you loved. No, I said aloud, my voice my own for the first time in days. You did that. You used my hands, but you made the choice. And that means... I looked directly at Abaddon, even as his presence tried to crush my will. That means you're not as powerful as you pretend to be. Silence. Abaddon's roar shook the chamber, but I could hear desperation underneath the rage. You will obey. I don't think I will. What happened next was agony beyond description. The entity that had been possessing me didn't leave quietly. It clawed its way out of my mind like a parasite being surgically removed without anesthesia. I collapsed to the stone floor, convulsing as every memory of the past 3 days crashed over me simultaneously. Elena's death, my coworkers' murders, the horror of watching my own hands commit atrocities while I screamed helplessly inside my own skull. But underneath the pain was something else. Relief. For the first time since this began, my thoughts were entirely my own. You think you've won? Adrian snarled, his handsome mask finally falling away completely. Underneath was something reptilian and ancient, all teeth and hunger. You think you can just walk away? I don't know, I gasped, struggling to my feet, but I'm going to try. That's when the real torture began. The chamber around me shifted, becoming Elena's apartment again, but now she was there, alive, beautiful, reaching out to me with love and forgiveness. Casimir, she said, her voice exactly as I remembered. You can save me. You can undo everything. All you have to do is pick up the match. It's not real, I told myself desperately. She's dead. You know she's dead. But she looked so real, so perfectly Elena, that every fiber of my being wanted to believe. They're lying to you, the Elena thing continued. About what happened, about who's responsible. You didn't kill me, Cass. You saved me. You ended my suffering when they would have made it last for days. The worst part was that she was partially right. I had ended Elena's suffering. The knife sliding between her ribs had been an act of mercy, even if it was manipulated mercy. That's what they're counting on, I realized. The gray areas, the places where their lies mix with uncomfortable truths. You're not Elena, I said firmly. Elena would never ask me to burn away my humanity. The false Elena's face twisted with rage. Then you've chosen suffering for both of us. The chamber exploded into chaos. Every person I'd ever cared about materialized around me. My parents, my sister, childhood friends, college roommates. All of them screaming in agony, all of them blaming me for their pain. This is what resistance costs. Adrian's voice echoed from everywhere at once. Everyone you've ever loved will pay for your defiance. But even as the false phantoms tormented me, I could see what was really happening. Monitors throughout the chamber showed the real world, where the psychological warfare system I'd helped create was already spreading through global networks. In Seattle, traffic management systems were failing in precisely calculated ways, causing maximum casualties. Social media feeds were flooding with rage-inducing content designed to turn neighbor against neighbor. Hospital equipment was malfunctioning in patterns that looked accidental, but maximized patient suffering. This was happening because of code I'd written, algorithms I'd debugged, systems I'd helped optimize. You see? Adrian laughed as he forced me to watch city after city descend into chaos. Your resistance is meaningless. The harvest has already begun. On screen after screen, I watched humanity tear itself apart. Mass shootings triggered by subliminal messages. Families destroying each other over manufactured political divisions. Military forces turning their weapons on civilian populations. And feeding on all of it, growing stronger with every act of violence and despair, were thousands of entities like the ones surrounding me. 7 billion souls, Abaddon intoned with satisfaction. The largest harvest in our species' history. That's when I understood what I had to do. Fighting the entities directly was impossible. They were too powerful, too ancient, too experienced at psychological manipulation. But they had one weakness. They needed technology to reach most of their victims. And I knew technology better than anyone in this room. You're right, I said, pretending to surrender. I can't stop you, but before I join you, I want to understand. Show me the system architecture. Show me how it all connects. Adrian smiled, thinking he'd won. Of course, you built most of it, after all. The chamber filled with holographic displays showing the global network topology they'd infected. Every major platform, every government system, every smart device, all connected through my psychological manipulation algorithms. And all of it running through a central coordination server that I'd designed with a very specific backdoor. Lena had always said I was too paranoid about system security. Every piece of software I wrote included hidden kill switches, emergency overrides that only I knew about, old habits from my early days as a freelance developer when clients sometimes tried to steal code without payment. The psychological warfare system was no exception. "It's beautiful," I said, studying the displays while mentally mapping the pathways to my hidden overrides. "Elegant, comprehensive, unstoppable." "Exactly," Adrian preened. "Your species' own connectivity becomes the weapon of its destruction." Almost there. I could see the access points I needed, but reaching them would require getting close to the central control interface. And that meant convincing them I genuinely surrendered. "I want to help," I lied. "But first, I need to purge the last of my human attachments." I held up the match. "Like you said?" "Excellent," Adrian said. "Burn it all." I struck the match, watching the small flame dance on its tip. Around me, the false images of Elena's apartment waited to be consumed. But instead of lighting the apartment, I threw the match at the central control interface. The match was just a match. It couldn't damage their systems directly. But it was enough distraction for me to lunge forward and slam my palm against the quantum processing core they'd built around my algorithms. Biometric locks that still recognized me as the system's original architect. Genetic scanners that confirmed my identity. Voice print analyzers that authenticated my commands. And then I spoke the words I'd buried so deep in the code that not even demonic intelligence had found them. Emergency Protocol Omega 777. Complete system purge. Authorization, Casimir Wellmont. Execute immediately. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Every server running my psychological manipulation algorithms began a cascading shutdown sequence. Not just stopping, purging, overwriting themselves with random data, burning out network interfaces, sending kill commands to every connected system. "What have you done?" Abaddon roared, his form becoming less stable as the network he relied upon began to collapse. "What I should have done days ago," I replied, watching the global status displays flicker and die one by one. I built a kill switch into everything. Every algorithm, every interface, every piece of code, because I never trust anything completely. On the monitors showing the real world, the chaos was already beginning to subside. The traffic systems were reverting to manual override. Social media platforms were displaying error messages instead of rage-inducing content. The subliminal frequencies broadcasting through smart speakers went silent. Humanity was waking up from its induced nightmare. "You've only delayed the inevitable," Adrian snarled, but I could see panic in his inhuman eyes. "We'll rebuild. We'll start again." "Maybe," I admitted, "but not today, and not with my help." The chamber began to destabilize as their technological anchor points disappeared. The ancient stones cracked, the impossible architecture folded in on itself, and the assembled demons began to lose cohesion. "You think destroying our network saves your species?" Abaddon's voice was fading now, his form becoming translucent. "This is merely a setback. We have walked among you for millennia. We will find other ways." "I'm sure you will," I said. "But now people will be looking for you. Now they'll know what to watch for." Because that had been my real plan all along. The system purge was important, but not as important as the data packet I'd embedded in the kill command. A complete record of everything I'd witnessed, everything I'd learned about demonic infiltration of human technology. It was broadcasting to every security agency, every research institution, every government database on Earth. As the underground chamber collapsed around me, I felt something changing in my own body. The extended possession had left marks, not just psychological trauma, but physical alterations that were only now becoming apparent. My vision was too sharp, showing me details human eyes shouldn't perceive. My hearing picked up frequencies that made my teeth ache. And underneath my skin, I could feel something moving, something that had been left behind when the entity abandoned me. They hadn't possessed me completely by accident. They'd been changing me, preparing me for something. I stumbled back onto the Seattle streets just as dawn broke over the city. Around me, people were emerging from buildings with confused, disoriented expressions, like sleepwalkers waking up from a shared nightmare. Emergency sirens wailed in the distance. News helicopters circled overhead. The city was in chaos, but it was human chaos now. People trying to understand what had happened, trying to help each other, trying to rebuild rather than destroy. But I knew it wasn't over. The demons had been forced to retreat, their technological infiltration network destroyed, but they were still out there, still hungry, still looking for new ways to feed on human suffering. And I was the only person alive who truly understood how they operated. I'm writing this account from a secure location, a Faraday cage deep underground, surrounded by analog equipment that can't be remotely accessed or compromised. The data packet I embedded in the kill command has been released to the world, but I know most people will dismiss it as an elaborate hoax or the ravings of someone who suffered a psychotic break. That's exactly what the demons are counting on. In the 3 days since the network collapse, I've been monitoring global communications through carefully isolated systems. The official story is already taking shape, a coordinated cyber-terrorism attack that exploited psychological manipulation algorithms in social media platforms. The perpetrators remain unknown. The technology has been classified and sealed away. No mention of supernatural entities, no acknowledgement of demonic infiltration, no recognition that this was just the opening move in a much larger war. But I know the truth, and more importantly, I know they're not finished with me. The physical changes are accelerating. My reflection in mirrors sometimes shows things that aren't there. Shadows with too many arms. Eyes that glow in darkness that isn't dark enough. I can hear whispers in languages I don't recognize, feel presences just outside my peripheral vision. They marked me during the possession, and now they're calling me home. I don't have much time left. Maybe hours, maybe days, but not long. The entity I expelled from my mind left something behind, a seed, a connection, a way for them to find me no matter where I hide. But that also means I can find them. I've spent the last 72 hours developing new algorithms, new detection systems, new ways to identify and combat their influence. The code is hidden in servers around the world, activated by dead man switches that will trigger if I don't check in every 24 hours. If they take me, when they take me, the fight continues without me. To anyone reading this, the demons are real. They feed on human suffering and use our own technology against us. The network I destroyed was just one vector. They'll find others. Social media, smart home devices, medical equipment, military systems. Anything connected to the internet is a potential pathway for their influence. Watch for the signs. Unexplained behavioral changes in large populations. Technology that seems to develop a malicious agenda of its own. Algorithms that promote division and hatred more effectively than they should. And trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, really wrong, in a way that makes your skin crawl and your thoughts turn dark, then it probably is. Elena died trying to understand them through psychology. My coworkers died because I let them use our programming skills as weapons. Thousands more will die if people don't start taking this threat seriously. The demons are patient, they're intelligent, and they're absolutely committed to turning humanity into their feeding ground. But they're not invincible. They need our cooperation, our despair, our willingness to surrender our better nature. As long as people resist, as long as we remember what it means to be human, they can't win. I hear footsteps in the corridor outside. Heavy boots, but walking with too perfect rhythm. They've found me. Time to see if my final gambit works. If you never hear from me again, remember this. The war is just beginning, but it's not hopeless. Fight them with compassion instead of hatred. Build connections instead of walls. Trust each other instead of algorithms. And whatever you do, never give up your humanity. It's the one thing they can never take from you. They're at the door now. I can see shadows moving underneath it. Too many shadows, with too many angles. The door is opening, but it's not Adrian. It's not Abaddon. It's not any of the demons I've been fighting. It's Elena. Perfect, beautiful Elena. Exactly as she was the night I killed her. No wounds, no blood, smiling at me with infinite love and forgiveness. "Hello, Casimir," she says softly. Did you really think you were fighting them? You're dead, I whisper. I watched you die. I killed you. She laughs, and it's the most beautiful sound I've ever heard. Oh, my sweet delusional Casimir. You didn't kill me. You never could. Do you want to know the truth? The room around us shifts, and suddenly we're back in our apartment. But it's wrong. Too clean, too perfect. Like a movie set. There never were any demons, Casimir. No Adrian, no Abaddon, no underground chambers. Just you having a complete psychotic break. No, that's not. You've been in Western State Hospital for 3 months, catatonic. The doctors say you killed 5 of your co-workers, then came home and murdered me in a delusional rage. You believed we were all possessed by demons. She shows me a mirror. The reflection staring back is hollow-eyed, emaciated, strapped to a hospital bed with thick leather restraints. The emails, the meetings, the possession, all hallucinations, products of a mind that couldn't accept what it had done. You created an entire fantasy where demons made you kill us because the truth was too horrible to face. But the technology, the global network. There is no global network. Casimir, you're a data analyst who snapped under pressure. The psychological warfare system you think you built, you were just updating spreadsheets. The kill switch you activated, you unplugged your computer during a psychotic episode. I feel my sanity cracking like glass. The other victims, the patterns. Random violence you connected with paranoid delusions. Mrs. Patterson died of natural causes. Dr. Chen is fine. She's actually been trying to treat you. The demons told you she was insane because your subconscious knew she was getting too close to breaking through your delusions. Elena moves closer, her eyes filled with terrible compassion. The hardest part is, somewhere deep down, you know all this. You've always known. That's why you fought so hard against the possession. You were fighting your own guilt. Please, I beg, just let me die. Let me stop. But Casimir, Elena smiles, and suddenly her face isn't kind anymore. It's hungry, predatory. Who said you get to stop? Her voice drops to a whisper that seems to come from everywhere at once. What makes you think this conversation is real either? The hospital room dissolves. Elena's face melts like wax, revealing something underneath that my mind refuses to process. You'll never know what's real and what's madness, Casimir. That's your hell. Every moment of lucidity will be poisoned by doubt. Every revelation will crumble into another layer of delusion. Is this real? Are you really crazy? Are the demons actually here? Or is this just another hallucination? The thing wearing Elena's voice laughs. The beautiful truth is, it doesn't matter anymore. Your sanity is broken beyond repair. You'll spend eternity questioning every thought, every perception, every moment of consciousness. Welcome to your personal hell, Casimir. We never needed to possess you completely. We just needed to break your ability to distinguish reality from madness. And now, I'm back in the hospital bed, screaming, doctors rushing in with sedatives. Now you're ours forever, because you'll never trust your own mind again. The last thing I see before the drugs take hold is Elena standing in the corner, her face shifting between love and malevolence. Sweet dreams, Casimir. See you in the next hallucination.
Western State Hospital. Patient file name, Casimir Wilmot. Diagnosis, acute paranoid schizophrenia with violent ideation. Status, maximum security psychiatric hold. Patient continues to experience complex auditory and visual hallucinations involving demonic entities. Claims to be documenting the truth, but produces only incoherent rambling about supernatural possession and global conspiracies. Of particular concern, patient has become convinced that his periods of apparent lucidity are themselves hallucinations, and his hallucinatory episodes are reality. This has created a feedback loop where treatment becomes impossible. Any improvement in his condition is dismissed by the patient as another layer of demonic deception. Patient repeatedly asks staff, "How do I know you're real? How do I know anything is real?" Has become completely unable to trust his own perceptions. Recommendation: indefinite hospitalization. Patient poses extreme danger to self and others and shows no signs of recovery. Note: patient was found today writing frantically on the wall with his own blood. When asked what he was writing, he said, "The real story. The one that will save everyone. They have to know the truth." The wall was blank. Or is this just another hallucination? How can you tell? How can anyone tell?